Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really remarkable story in American business, the journey of Tyler Perry. Yeah, you see the headline number now, right? Worth what, $1.4 billion, runs a huge 330-acre studio in Atlanta. But the paradox, the starting point, is just stunning when you think about it. How does someone who started out literally writing scripts while sleeping in a tiny, beat-up Geo Metro car, someone totally ignored by Hollywood, how do they build that kind of empire and, this is key, own 100% of everything?
It really is more than just, a rags to riches story. It's like a tactical guide to creative control. So our mission today isn't just the biography, or even Medea, really. It's to get under the hood. We want to understand the specific strategy, the mindset that let Perry basically sidestep the entire Hollywood system. He didn't just play the game, he changed the rules. And we're zeroing in on ownership, how that became his ultimate power source financially.
Exactly. We're after the playbook, like the actual sequence of decisions. How did he turn storytelling, something seemingly intangible, into actual generational wealth?
Yeah.
What's the real difference between just getting paid for a gig and building, true capital?
Okay, so to really get that, we have to start way back. Back when there was zero glamour, parked behind some rundown theater, that's where the leverage really began, believe it or not.
Right, let's unpack that foundation of endurance. The early struggle. It wasn't just humble beginnings like people say. He puts it more bluntly, I was just poor as hell. He was writing scripts by hand, living in that tiny car, no connections, no funding, invisible.
And those are the years, the unpaid, invisible years. That's where most people would burn out or just give up. The data, his own story, shows this period was absolutely crucial for building resilience, both financial and emotional. I mean, think about this. He scrapes together his last few $100 for his first big stage play attempt, and it bombs. Completely. Like 30 people show up, and apparently 20 of them were friends or family.
Ouch. That's the kind of failure that usually ends careers before they start. But he just kept going. He used that failure almost like market research, didn't he? To figure out what wasn't working and try again. It's an amazing example of building momentum through failure, not despite it.
Exactly. And that sheer persistence, combined with having absolutely nothing to fall back on, that actually became his weapon. When you genuinely have nothing left to lose, you can make demands. You can walk away from bad deals. Established players, they need that next paycheck, that predictable cash flow. He didn't have that dependency, so he could afford to say no to the system.
Which brings us right to the absolute core of his empire, that strategy of 100% ownership. This is where he just drew a line in the sand. Completely rejected the standard Hollywood deal.
Right. He flipped the whole model. Instead of looking for venture capital or a network deal where you immediately sign away your rights, he self-funded his early plays back in the late 90s. Pure hustle, ticket sales, renting out small theaters. He essentially was his own studio right from the very beginning.
And then when he moved into film and TV, he just scaled that same principle up. We should probably spell this out for listeners, because in Hollywood, the normal way is you, the creator, sell your idea, your script, your characters, the rights. You sell it to a studio, you get a fee, maybe some points on the back end, profits that, let's be honest, often mysteriously never seem to appear.
Correct. Perry just refused that dilution. He kept 100% ownership. Scripts, characters, the final say, the profits, everything. For basically every single film and show. That single decision, that's the bedrock of his wealth, more than anything else. And here's the technical bit that matters. Ownership means controlling the residuals. Residuals are the payments you get every time your show reruns or streams or gets sold somewhere new. For most creators, the studio owns that stream and pays out a tiny piece. But Perry owns the IP and the distribution, so every dollar from reruns, streaming, it flows directly back to him, his company. That's pure compounding capital, generated passively from work he already did.
That's the engine, isn't it? It guarantees that the creative work he does today directly fuels the wealth accumulation tomorrow. Is why it wasn't just a different choice. It was financially insulating. It built a fortress.
Precisely. And that mindset, holding on to every single asset he generated, it didn't just buy financial freedom. It bought structural power.
Right.
And the ultimate physical proof of that is Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta. 330 acres. It's one of the biggest, most modern studios in the U.S. And crucially, the only one of its scale fully owned by a Black filmmaker. His whole business philosophy seems to echo that. Don't just create, own. Because, if someone else owns your work, they kind of own your future, don't they?
Okay, so let's connect that ownership, that financial control, to how he actually works, the operational side. Which leads us to this engine of consistency, this relentless, almost unbelievable work ethic. Perry is basically his own writer's room. He often writes, directs, produces, edits, even acts, sometimes all in the same day or week.
Yeah, the industry insiders are consistently kind of stunned by the volume and the speed. You know, a typical big TV show might have a dozen writers taking months just to plot out a season, but sources say Perry can write an entire season of a show himself in just a few days. It's intense, and that speed isn't just like a personal quirk, it's strategic.
It's a business advantage, right? Speed means lower overhead, fewer cooks in the kitchen, fewer compromises. By controlling everything from the script to the final cut, he cuts risk and makes sure the end product is exactly what he wants, delivered fast.
And that speed feeds back into the ownership loop. Faster creation means more owned content. More owned content generates more capital almost immediately, which lets him keep funding his own projects without ever needing outside money or permission. It's a self-fueling cycle. He sees every movie, every show, not just as art, but as an asset, capital. His philosophy is pretty clear on this. I'm not just making shows, I'm building a library. He's turning creative work into long-term financial assets, a library of owned IP that earns money constantly. That's the huge difference, isn't it? Between working for money and making your work become money that works for you.
Yeah, and when you put it all together, the deeper lesson for you listening is this kind of success isn't about one flash of genius. It's about accumulating consistency, day after day, compounded over years. That almost military discipline plus refusing to delegate key parts. It reinforces that core belief. Nobody is coming to save the day. You have to build it and own it yourself. Okay, so we've got the internal discipline, the ownership. How does that translate outward into the choices he makes in the market? That pace, that control, it seems like it allows him to make these really uncompromising decisions, which brings us to purpose over popularity.
Yeah, this is a really interesting pivot. He chose his values first, it seems. He was apparently offered huge Hollywood deals constantly. Deals that would have meant faster fame, maybe bigger upfront money, but they all came with strings attached, giving up creative control, giving up IP ownership, and he just kept saying no. And crucially, he chose his audience very deliberately. He targeted viewers that mainstream Hollywood was, frankly, ignoring, or misunderstanding, or even dismissing. Primarily Black audiences, particularly in the South, working class folks.
So he didn't just find a niche market by accident. He made a conscious mission out of serving that audience, providing representation, stories they could see themselves in when almost nobody else was doing it on that scale.
Exactly. It wasn't just about finding a market gap. It felt like finding a mission. Entertainment, yes, but also representation.
Which strategically was also brilliant. By focusing on that massive underserved audience, he basically eliminated his competition, didn't he? He built an economic moat. He became the go-to provider for millions of people.
He knew what he was building and why. You hear it in that quote. I wanted to own my story so no one else could rewrite it. That ownership was financial, yes, but it was also about controlling the narrative, his own and the ones he presented.
So the pattern seems clear. Every time there was a choice, more money, faster fame versus total control, total freedom.
He picked control every single time. That really defines it, values and assets over just, getting applause or validation from the establishment. And that willingness to put audience loyalty over critical acclaim, that's probably the root of his resilience.
And you really see that long-term investor-like thinking when things get tough. During crises, think about COVID-19 in 2020. Hollywood just stopped. Everything shut down.
Right. But Perry didn't wait around for new rules or union agreements.
Nope. He used his studio that he owned outright to build a completely self-contained quarantine bubble. Camp quarantine, they called it, I think.
Yeah.
Flew in cast and crew, tested everyone constantly, housed them on site, and just kept filming for months while everyone else was dark.
That's the power of owning your own infrastructure. The ability to pivot instantly, absorb shocks that paralyze competitors. That's leverage. And we saw that forward thinking again just recently, right, in 2024. Yeah. Regarding AI, he made news pausing that huge $800 million studio expansion.
Yeah, why?
To specifically stop and figure out how AI might fundamentally change film production, what kind of infrastructure would actually be needed in, say, 5 or 10 years. He's willing to hit pause and strategize while others might just rush ahead. That's playing the long game.
Now, we do have to touch on the criticisms. His empire isn't without friction. He's always been and still is heavily criticized. His work gets called formulaic. Medea gets laughed at by, coastal critics. And with that scale and control comes scrutiny. There have been public discussions, legal challenges around workplace issues, power dynamics.
Sure, and that tension is almost built into his model, isn't it? He succeeded by super serving a mass audience that wants consistency, familiar themes. That often clashes directly with what critics value: novelty, complexity. His response to criticism, whether it's about the work or the workplace, seems consistently strategic. Less public fighting, more internal review, process, calculated silence sometimes.
Protecting the core mission, perhaps.
Perhaps. He seems to understand that the real test isn't how easy the climb is. It's how well your foundation holds up when the inevitable storms hit public scrutiny, crises. And his foundation holds because it's built on that adaptability and, crucially, that absolute ownership. As he himself said, "I've had to fight for every inch of ground I stand on." That fight seems baked into the belief that losing control is the only real failure.
So stepping back, the blueprint we've uncovered. It wasn't just about making movies or TV shows. Tyler Perry built a whole new economic path because the old one wasn't built for him. He found his audience, cut out the middlemen, and built actual capital-owned assets right from day one, not just fleeting entertainment products.
Yeah, I think if you boil this entire deep dive down, you get 3 core truths, 3 tactical takeaways that apply to almost anywhere. First, owning your IP, your core asset, is fundamentally more powerful than just chasing the next opportunity or paycheck.
Okay, makes sense.
Second, consistency and sheer volume, that relentless execution, it outlasts criticism. It outlasts the quest for perfection, especially when you're financially independent enough to keep going.
Right, the compounding effect.
And third, purpose. Targeting a specific, often ignored audience with real conviction beats chasing broad, fickle popularity every single time. Find your tribe.
Ownership, consistency, purpose. That's the blueprint from a Geo Metro to a $1.4 billion studio. And it really leaves us with a final thought, a challenge for you listening. Based on that absolute core lesson of ownership, what key part of your own story, your creative work, your career path, maybe even your personal narrative, are you still letting someone else define or control? And what might actually happen if, like Perry, you decided, starting today, to make a plan to take it all back?